This is an example of what a typical seed salesman looks like. We are very dependent on these fellows, so don't sell them short. Seed is like water and air. There would be no life without it. It seems these seed sales guys lead pretty interesting lives, but it's hard to get it out of them. They're kind of shy and modest, so I will speak for this one. My name is Richard Penner. I'm a Canadian, but have lived most of my adult life in California. I'm now retired and live in Saskatoon, Canada with my wife Lillian. My ancestors are Dutch, German Mennonites who historically moved around Europe due to persecution for their religious beliefs. They ended up in the Ukrainian part of Russia about 1780, became quite prosperous, and then lost everything in the Communist Revolution of 1917. They ended up in Western Canada in the 1920s as irrigation farmers starting from scratch. I was born in 1941 and grew up with my two younger sisters and parents on a farm near Rosemary, Alberta. There was a Blackfoot Indian reservation nearby and plenty of antelope. My dad was a certified seed grower. In fact, he was president for a time of the Canadian Seed Growers Association. That's probably where I got my interest in this kind of agriculture. In addition to that, I did really enjoy the farm life. I graduated from the University of Alberta in 1964 with an unclear idea of what I wanted to do. I could have taken over our farm, but I had itchy feet. My friend Bill Martins had an uncle living in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which sounded kind of exotic. We bought a used VW Beetle and headed south. It took us 4 months to get there, with many interesting adventures along the way. We explored Brazil plus Paraguay, where we found Mennonite farmers with our same Russian background. In the spring of '65, we flew to Europe where I had a prearranged job on a German farming estate near Heidelberg. I also spent part of that year as a volunteer for a Mennonite aid organization reporting on a flood in Yugoslavia. I was back at home in Canada by Christmas time, 1965. Dad and I had a hard talk. I told him I didn't think I would be happy settling down as a farmer and that I had my sights set on being involved in international agriculture. He understood that and did not try to persuade me otherwise. I began working as a production field man for an American seed company in nearby Brooks, Alberta. This company specialized in producing pea seed in this area, and my job was to work with the farmers who produced the seed on contract with the company. One year I was advising my growers to plant early so they could harvest earlier, thus avoiding the bad fall weather. One guy really took that to heart and ended up stranded in the middle of his field. One day my boss asked me to come in to his office and suggested that maybe I'd take an opportunity down in California as a field man. There was an opening. I jumped at the chance, and so did my little red sports car. Before I knew it, I was advising California farmers on how to grow carrot, onion, watermelon, all kinds of things I knew nothing about. It was a very steep learning curve, and I enjoyed it a lot. Some of our growers also grew flower seeds, although not for our own company, but the fields were beautiful. I had always wanted a 55 T-bird. Lived near San Francisco, where the hippie psychedelic subculture was really getting going. Quite exciting compared to Rosemary, Alberta. I liked the seed business, but I could see that it would take a long time for me to reach my goal of international sales management with my current employer. I paused my career and signed up to study French language at the Alliance Française in Paris, France. It was really an excuse to live in Paris for a while. I also worked on a farm near Paris where I had a friend who I met in California when he was an exchange student there. My school friends from Paris used to come to the farm for the weekend and party. During this time, my friend in Canada, Rudy Jansen, and I decided to go camping in Russia through the area that our ancestors had originally lived in. I bought a used Fiat station wagon, and we were on our way through Romania to the Ukraine, Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporozhye, Yalta, Odessa, then back to Paris via Bulgaria, Turkey, and Yugoslavia. I ended up back in California and landed an international job with a large agriculture company called FMC Corporation. They were in the agriculture, machinery, and chemical business and wanted to get into seed. So they bought 3 seed companies. Within 2 years, I was international sales manager of their seed division, and my career really took off. I learned a lot at this company. We did innovative things in agriculture. For example, a huge cost in tomato production was the hand harvesting. While the machinery division was working on a mechanical harvester for tomatoes, we in the seed division were developing tomato varieties that had a firm skin and ripened more or less at the same time on the plant. The result was automating tomato production and reducing costs by 50%. As you can tell, I'm more a pioneer than a settler. I'm also an entrepreneur. So in 1984, I started my own seed company, specializing in developing agriculture seed products for the Middle East countries. For some reason, I had become intrigued by the Arabic world and had a sense for developing a trusting rapport with those people. Our head office was in Modesto, California, where many of my competitors were located, and also my former employer. I myself lived in Sonoma, nearby Sonoma County. That's a wine country. My production facility was about 200 miles north of Modesto in Chico, where a lot of the actual seed production was located. Most of our seeds were packed in hermetically sealed cans and shipped by air. Some hybrid seeds required a lot of handwork for pollination. This kind of work was done in under contract in Taiwan and the Philippines. My marketing strategy was to have exclusive distributors in every country who knew they would reap the rewards after investing time and money in developing new seed varieties. That means I was doing business with the same people year after year. I got to know them and their families quite well. It turned out to be a successful and agreeable arrangement. So this is our distributor for Morocco, Mr. Ahmad Massawi. He's a Berber tribe from southern Morocco where most of the vegetable production is, and most of those are destined for Europe in the wintertime. He's a very congenial fellow, but we have communication problems, he and I, because of him speaking Arabic and French and I speaking German and English. So we would, with the help of our hands, I do remember one visit when he picked me up at the airport, and on the way home, we got in a discussion about women, and particularly wives, and I commented that his family seemed to me to be very harmonious, and asked him how that came about. He was quick to motion towards the glove compartment in front of where I was sitting, and suggested I open it, and so I did, and there was a revolver. And he said, "That's the answer." This is a government official in Algeria where there was no free enterprise. We had to sell to the government, and so this was the guy we worked with. I can't remember his name. Kind of a boring guy as far as I remember. Then Libya, Ali Gamati. Quite a colorful character. I remember him always bragging about his ability with women, and I'd have to listen to the details of this, especially when he went to Cairo, where he favored the Egyptian women. It was kind of, I guess, boring, really. The next one is Shaban El-Korma. He is Mr. Seed of Egypt. Everybody acknowledges him as king of the seed people in Egypt, and Egypt is a huge market. There are many people, but it's almost impossible to do business. Then we have Wahab Magli in Sudan. Magli and I have done a lot of business together, and actually we're still doing it even though I'm retired. Sudan is a very agricultural country, very good soil, lots of fresh water, but no government and no money. So it's a challenging environment, to say the least. Then we go to Yemen. This is Mr. Abdul Majid Maslad. Yemen is probably my most favorite and interesting Arab country that there is. It's one of the oldest. That's where the Arabs really got started. It has a people that are very intelligent, hardworking. This is where mathematics was born. Algebra is a Arabic word, originated here in Yemen. Queen of Sheba comes from here. The problem is the modern day life is way behind. Their sultan tried to keep the outside world out, and there are only now starting to be paved roads. They finally have a school system, and it's a very primitive place. But that makes it actually also very interesting. Then we'll go to Saudi Arabia. This is Adib Mahmoud, probably one of the smartest businessmen I've ever encountered. He was able to pull stuff off that I just shook my head. Unfortunately, he ended up with drugs and gambling, and lost his wife, lost his family, lost his business, and ended up losing his life just last year. But probably Saudi Arabia was our biggest market, and it was due to his management that we did that. Then we had a unique relationship in Kuwait. Small country, lots of money, so they import everything. The gentleman to my right is Mohammed Nasser Al Sayr, probably the third richest man in the world. Very reserved, but had a soft spot in his heart for gardening. So he and I developed something special. Saeed Ali Moussaoui in Iran with his brother Hadi. Hadi was up in Tehran, and Ali was down south in Karamshar, where most of the production was. Ali was a very impressive person. He was the mayor of his city. He was deeply religious, but very modern. He was well educated in England. And I learned a lot about Islam and business and just being a upright sample of a human being. Then we have in Iran, it was a big market for us, and so we had another distributor there in the north where Moussaoui was not very active, and his name was George Sarkisian. He was an Armenian and very difficult to work with, but had a lot of clout with the farmers. Developed a good personal relationship with him. One day he came and said, Richard, I need your help. We just love to have a baby, and we just seem there's something wrong. Could you line us up with somebody in California to help us out? So I did that. And they came, both him and his wife, to a clinic, but it didn't work out. So they go back. 6 months later, I get an email. We got a kid, by golly. And so it's one of those cases where you try so hard, and then when you don't try anymore, there she is. This truck is a symbol. It's in Iraq. I don't have many pictures out of Iraq, but it was a huge market. In fact, the biggest vegetable seed shipment that was ever made from the U.S. anywhere was made by us, and it went to Iraq. It was 40 containers of cucumber seed and 50 containers of watermelon seed. And our company prevailed on me. They just couldn't understand how a country could use that much seed. That was more seed than all of the United States. And so I brought them back a picture of a truck like this. What they do when they seed in Iraq, they fill a truck like this full of the seed, whether it's whatever it is, tomato seed, cucumber or watermelon. Put a couple of Pakistanis in the back with shovels, and they slowly drive across the field, and they shovel this seed out onto the surface. Then, after that, they run a tractor and some harrows over that to kick up the dirt a bit. And then, if it rains, maybe some of it will come up, and that's the way they produce their vegetables. So we encouraged that, used lots of seed. Again, working with the government there, no free enterprise. Syria, this is Mazen Zaido. Our competitors used to tell me, why do you have him as your distributor? He doesn't know a thing about vegetables or about seed. And I said, we have him because he knows how to get seed in the country, and he knows how to get money out of the country. And almost nobody in our business knew how to do that. So he's worth a lot to us. His right-hand man, who does know something about seed, is Emil Hanna, a Lebanese person living in Beirut, and he was in charge in Syria also. One thing about Syria is that the food was just absolutely outstanding, no matter where we ate. And I noticed in other Arab countries that men would often comment on the Syrian women and how good a cook they were, and that they wanted a wife from Syria. This is also in the Zato, their headquarters was in northern Syria in Aleppo. A big casualty in the last war there. And also a site of many interesting historical places. These stairs, where you could see the rock is just worn down, is probably the oldest castle in the world. It would have been on the outskirts of the Babylonian Empire in the old days, and it's still there, and people are still walking on it. Then we go to Jordan, very progressive country, high standards of education. This is Nabil Suktian, who is actually a Palestinian. He used to live in Jerusalem. They got kicked out of there, as we all know, many of them did, and started up again in Amman, Jordan. He had recently built a new house, and I commented on the rock, and he said, "Oh, those stones come from a mosque." They were tearing down a mosque in our neighborhood, and I asked if I could buy the stones, and they said yes. So his house is made out of stone from a mosque. Here we're inspecting crops in the Jordan Valley. There wasn't much contact between Israel and the Arab countries, which you probably all know about. So we did have, however, a relationship with an Israeli seed company. They have a very advanced seed industry, and it was with a company called Genesis, and we had some research arrangements with them, whereby we would sell their seed in the Arab countries where they couldn't sell. And that worked out to be a very good thing. In fact, some of the products that we worked on with them ended up in the U.S. and Canadian market too, like the small smooth-skinned cucumbers. Where you used to buy English long cucumbers, now you can buy those little ones. Well, that was a product of this company. The guy I worked with there was Dr. Isaac Neer. We also did a little work in Europe. We had a customer in Italy, which I nurtured just because I like to go to Italy. Anzalone, Simanti Anzalone. And another asset there was that Anzalone was the president of the off-road racing club of Italy, and he would always encourage me to stop on my way to the Middle East at a time when they had a rally, and he would get a Jeep for me, and I'd join in, and we'd be running around the mountains of northern Italy. It was just great fun. Excuse me. We did a lot of work in Eastern Europe where we were a little more competitive, and that was at the hand and blessing of Farid Mazurovic, who is a Croatian and probably the best salesman I've ever seen. This is one of our customers in Serbia, in Belgrade area. We did a few things in Croatia. Besides selling seed, we had a presence there. We sponsored a music concert once in Zagreb, a fundraiser for a children's hospital, and here I'm giving the check to the children's hospital president after the concert. We also did some business in Greece. This is Nikos Kokorits and their wives and other colleagues in a night out on the town. He was selling irrigation equipment and seeds and some chemicals. He had interesting friendship with Aristotle Onassis. Onassis had asked him to install an irrigation system on his island Scorpios, and Nikos told me a lot of stories about that. How he got to know Onassis. He met Maria Callas, his second wife, I guess, and Jacqueline Kennedy, the third wife. Nick used to stay on the Christina, his yacht, whenever he went to inspect his installations, and that's where he met. For example, he told me about Jackie, and he told me a funny story how when she first came on that boat, she looked around and she said, absolutely anything that Maria Callas has touched has got to go. So she redesigned that poor guy's life. Sorghum is a very important crop in Sudan. They grow about 5 million acres of it every year. Most of it is milled into flour for bread. It's a drought-tolerant crop high in protein, so therefore also is a good livestock feed. Magley and I decided it was time to introduce hybrids. We invited some of the best farmers and a few government officials to a weekend seminar we had arranged in Cairo. The guest speaker was Dr. Fred Miller, Mr. Sorghum of Texas. Next step was test plots in Sudan to see which hybrids adapted the best to local conditions. We had farmer field days, and pretty soon many 20-foot containers of hybrid sorghum seed were making their way from the port of Houston to Port Sudan. Because of the dramatic increase in yield, they now only need to devote half as much land to sorghum production. The next seismic event that happened in the Middle East involved the king of Saudi Arabia. He was sick and tired of hearing reports that the world was quietly laughing, saying things like, look at those primitive Arabs. When the oil runs out, they'll have to go back to their camels. He got his ministers together and said, we will show them. We're going to start by becoming self-sufficient in the basic necessities of life. I want you to start by making sure that we can produce most of our own food. Within days, the Minister of Agriculture announced a subsidy on local wheat production amounting to 400% of the current world price. And this was a big local shock. And very soon, the world agriculture industry came knocking at the Saudi door. No problem, they said. We'd be happy to help you out. Up until then, there had been virtually no crop production in Saudi Arabia. The land and climate were simply not suited for it. But now they did have the cash, so the king's ego had to be respected. My distributor, Adib Mahmoud, called me with the news and suggested I get over there pronto. We had a lot of planning to do. Our intention was to become one of the main suppliers of wheat planting seed. First, we had to decide which wheat varieties were best suited to the Saudi conditions. We set up a special management committee for this particular purpose. Water for irrigation. And in some cases, the water was so hot, they had to build cooling towers before it could be used to irrigate the plants. The cost of implementing this largely artificial infrastructure was enormous and never really talked about. The soil was very sandy and hence infertile, so huge quantities of fertilizer were required. In our case, we ran extensive variety trials in both California and Saudi Arabia to determine the best wheat varieties. Next, we had to line up seed production with our California growers and make sure we had the equipment to process and package a large volume of seed. No one really knew what the grain production objectives were in Saudi Arabia. It was really a Wild West atmosphere. I have to admit, I loved it. It all developed fairly fast. Decisions were made quickly in the government because it's a central authoritarian kind of system. The global suppliers were private companies who were eager to participate and who could act rather quickly. Our situation was that we were already active in the local seed market, and our brand was getting to be well known and respected by the Saudi farmers. Our wheat seed sales doubled each year for the first 3 years, and soon we were the largest certified wheat seed supplier in the kingdom. Everything was huge. Our annual sales to Saudi Arabia were around 50,000 metric tons of certified planting seed, all fungicide treated and packed in 50-kilo bags. That's enough to plant about 1 million acres. There's a short video here that demonstrates what this was like. County. And this is a field of certified Yukora Rojo seed that's being irrigated right now with siphon surface irrigation. And here are two gentlemen, Don McAllister, S&W Seed Company, and Vince Steiner, the owner who farms this land with his son John. Is that right, Vince?
Pretty close, right?
Pretty close. And you got a little help too, right?
Yes.
How far are we from Fresno here, Vince?
About 40 miles southwest of Fresno.
Oh yeah, okay. And how many acres do you farm, Vince?
We have 12 sections here on the ranch.
Okay, how many acres is that?
About a little over 7,000 acres.
Uh-huh. And your main crops are?
Cotton, tomatoes for the cannery, wheat, lettuce for seed, safflower, and a few other minor crops.
Yeah, should be enough to keep you busy. We're standing here on one of your wheat fields. How much certified Yukora Rojo are you growing this year, Vince?
About 1,000 acres.
Oh yeah. And you expect to get how much tonnage off of that?
Roughly makes about 3¼ tons would be an average crop for us.
Per acre.
Per acre.
Yeah.
We've been monitoring that for years, and that's just about what it.
That's about the average.
About the average.
Oh yeah. This field that we're on right now, Vince, when was this planted?
It was planted just before Christmas time, about the 25th, about the 25th of December.
And right now we are in the middle of, just past the middle of April. And you'll probably be harvesting
About the 20th of July. 20th of June we'll start.
Yeah. Okay, now you've contracted this field out to S&W Seed Company, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Don, how often has the state been out here inspecting this for certification?
Well, we have 2 inspections. One of them is done by the California Department of Agriculture through the Ag Commissioners, and that's for the phytosanitary, and that gets 3 inspections. They've already had 2. They have 1 more to go. They look at it at different stages of growth to check for different diseases, and then in about middle of May, California Crop will come along and do its certification inspection. So actually there's 4 inspections by 2 agencies totally that's going to get on all these things.
Sample bag from each truck. This one you need to
check this.
Florida Farms. Put the lot number in. What does the WH tag mean? 13639.
This one?
Yeah, what does that mean?
That's
WH?
the name of the tag.
Oh, just the wheat tag. Oh, yeah. Bushel weight is 64 pounds per bushel. Moisture is 8.8. Protein is 13.1. Do you put the... Now that's the moisture there. 9% moisture.
That's protein.
And that's protein. sort of high-octane time, we had to always keep in mind how artificial this whole thing was. After all, it began very suddenly at the whim of a powerful king, and could stop just as suddenly if he decided that he had made his point. This kind of production required quite a bit of long-range planning. At average yields of 3 tons per acre, our sales required production from about 17,000 acres. What do we do if the king decides halfway through a production cycle that he is quite happy now and shuts the whole thing down overnight? And that could really happen. And we had moles deep inside the Saudi Department of Agriculture. We had production agreements with grain brokers in California who would take the seed as grain for making flour if we were not able to use it as planting seed. I will never forget the phone call in February 1993 when Adib called me from Saudi Arabia and told me, "Don't sign those purchase orders for bags from South Korea. There's something weird going on over here." As it turned out, the king canceled the wheat subsidy in April 1993, and the whole operation came to a screeching halt. Many companies went broke. We made it because we were cautious and we had an excellent information network. And then we went back to selling hybrid tomato seed after that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this story. It was a very unusual experience. Bye. So we returned to our normal vegetable seed business. I started attending conventions, something I was traditionally not very fond of. This one was in Rio de Janeiro. We even had one in Calgary. Nothing wrong with a little golf in Hawaii. Lil and I really enjoyed boating, so we spent most of the summers on our prairie otter exploring the BC coast. Then, eventually, I decided to lay down the hammer. I was 70 years old, so I sold the company to Bonanza Seed of Sacramento, who needed some help in the Middle East. A word about religion. I've traveled to the Middle East for about 40 years, usually 2 trips a year. There are Jews and Christians living in the Arab world, but very few. Most everyone is Muslim. The general atmosphere is similar to what it must have been like before the Reformation in the West. That's about 600 years ago, about 1520. Church and state together, most people on autopilot when it comes to religion. The line between religion and culture very blurred. A few radicals here and there. I would say in general, the public in the Arab countries are better informed about their religion than we in the West about Christianity. I was not shy about letting people know I was a Christian. I also pointed out that I would probably be a Muslim if I had been born and raised in the Arab culture. As far as I can see, the difference between us are not that great. We both believe in one God. We both believe in an important prophet who was a good example of what God was like. I would say the Middle East still has the Reformation ahead of them.